The night the system failed. If you think you've seen the worst of what prisons can hide, you haven't seen anything yet. Hit subscribe, stay sharp, and don't blink. Because this story only gets darker from here. The sirens were already screaming before the first call came in. Highway 66, just outside McAllister, Oklahoma. A state transport van sat abandoned on the shoulder, its engine still running, headlights cutting through the early morning fog. A rear door hung open. Trooper Daniel Reeves was the first to arrive. He stepped out of his cruiser slowly, hand resting near his sidearm, eyes scanning the quiet stretch of road. It didn't feel right. Dispatch, I'm on scene. Transport vehicle appears compromised. No visible personnel. He approached the van carefully. The closer he got, the more details began to surface. The driver's door was open, keys dangled from the ignition. A coffee cup sat on the dashboard. Whoever had been here had left in a hurry. Reeves reached the back door and paused. His instincts told him to wait for backup. He pulled the door open. Inside, restraints hung loose from the bench. One set unlocked cleanly. Another snapped, and then he saw it. A marking scratched into the metal wall of the van. Not random, not rushed, precise, intentional. 3 straight lines, intersected by a single diagonal slash. Reeves frowned. Dispatch, I think we've got an escape. Within minutes, the quiet highway turned into a controlled chaos of flashing lights, officers, and containment units. The area was locked down, roadblocks set up. Search teams deployed into the surrounding woods. Detective Laura Bennett arrived shortly after. She stepped out of her vehicle, her expression already tight with focus. Bennett wasn't new to prison-related cases, but something about this one had pulled her out personally. A transport breach this clean didn't just happen. What do we have? 2 officers unaccounted for. No signs of a struggle outside the vehicle. But inside, you should see it. Bennett moved to the back of the van, her eyes immediately catching the restraints, the layout. Then she saw the marking. Her gaze sharpened. You noticed this before? No, ma'am. Bennett leaned in closer, studying the lines. This wasn't done in panic, she said quietly. This was done with time, meaning, she straightened. Meaning whoever did this wasn't rushing to get out, they were sending a message. Reeves glanced back toward the empty road, to who Bennett didn't answer, because deep down, she already had a feeling. An hour later, the identity of the missing inmate was confirmed, Marcus Hale. The name alone was enough to shift the tone of the entire operation. Hale wasn't just another inmate. He was classified as high risk, transferred under strict supervision. Known for manipulation, strategic thinking, and an ability to influence others without raising his voice. He doesn't act without a plan, Bennett said. If he's out, this wasn't luck. You think he had help? Bennett shook her head slightly. I think he had something better. What's that? Time? The room fell silent, because time was the one thing no inmate was supposed to have during transport, and yet, everything about the scene suggested he did. Ours turned into a full-scale manhunt. Drones scanned the surrounding forest. K9 units tracked. Scent trails that led nowhere. Checkpoints extended for miles. But Marcus Hale was gone. No footprints. No witnesses. No vehicle stolen nearby. Just gone. By evening, Bennett was back at the transport van, going over every inch again. Something wasn't adding up. The marking, the clean release, the lack of resistance. It didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a transition. Detective, Reeves called. You might want to see this. Bennett walked over. Reeves handed her a tablet displaying recovered dashcam footage. Camera cut out for 3 minutes, he said, but it came back online briefly, before shutting down completely. Bennett pressed play. The footage flickered to life. The road stretched ahead. Empty and quiet. Then, movement. The van slowed. Not abruptly, not forced, controlled. The driver's silhouette shifted slightly, then froze. Bennett leaned closer. Pause it. Reeves did. She pointed at the screen. Zoom in. The image sharpened. And that's when they saw it. The driver wasn't moving. Not reacting. Just still. As if he had been waiting. Play it, Bennett said. The footage resumed. The van came to a complete stop. 3 seconds passed. Then the rear door opened from the inside. A figure stepped out, calm and hurried, head slightly tilted, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Marcus Hale. But he didn't run. He didn't look around. He simply walked forward, past the front of the van, and straight into the fog. The footage cut to black. Reeves exhaled slowly. That doesn't make any sense. Bennett didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the last frame before the screen went dark. Because there was something else, something barely visible, another figure, sitting in the passenger seat, not moving, not reacting, just like the driver. Bennett's voice dropped. He didn't escape alone. Reeves turned to her. You think someone helped him from inside? Bennett shook her head slowly, her expression tightening. No, she said. I think someone was already there, before the van even stopped. A heavy silence settled between them. Because if that was true, then this wasn't just an escape. It was something much bigger. And as Bennett replayed the footage one more time, her eyes locked onto the still figure in the passenger seat. A figure that, according to the transport logs, shouldn't have existed. But when they enhanced the image and finally saw the face clearly, everything about the case changed. The room fell into a suffocating silence as the enhanced image came into focus. Detective Laura Bennett didn't blink. She stared at the screen, her mind trying to catch up with what her eyes were already telling her. The face in the passenger seat wasn't distorted. It wasn't a trick of light or shadow. It was clear. Too clear. And it didn't belong there. Run it again, she said quietly. Reeves hesitated, then replayed the footage. The same sequence unfolded, the van slowing, the driver motionless, Marcus Hale stepping out with unsettling calm. But this time, all attention was on the passenger seat. The man sat upright, facing forward. No movement. No reaction. Just stillness. Like he had always been there. Pause it, Bennett said again. Reeves froze the frame. Pull up the transport manifest, she added. Another officer at the table quickly brought up the file. 2 correctional officers assigned. 1 driver, 1 escort. 1 inmate, Marcus Hale. That's it, Bennett pointed at the screen. Then who is that? No one answered. Because no one had an answer. Within the hour, the identities of the 2 missing officers were confirmed. Both had clean records. No disciplinary issues. No known connections to Hale. And yet, in the footage, neither of them behaved like men under threat. They didn't fight. They didn't resist. They just stopped. Could be chemical, one analyst suggested. Something airborne, fast-acting. Bennett shook her head. Even then, you'd see something, a reaction, disorientation. This? She gestured toward the frozen frame. This looks like compliance. Reeves leaned back, arms crossed. So you're saying they let it happen? I'm saying, Bennett replied. They didn't think they had a reason to stop it. The implication settled heavily over the room. Because if the officers weren't forced, then someone had convinced them. Or worse, someone they trusted was already inside that vehicle. Run facial recognition, Bennett said. It's already in process, the analyst replied. But if he's not in the system, he is, Bennett cut in. Or he was. Reeves glanced at her. You sound sure. Bennett didn't look away from the screen. Because people like this don't just appear out of nowhere. They get buried. Hours passed. The search for Marcus Hale expanded across state lines, but every lead dissolved into nothing. No sightings, no digital trace, no indication that he had even existed beyond that moment on the highway. But inside the investigation room, something else was beginning to surface, a pattern. Detective, the analyst called out suddenly. You need to see this. Bennett walked over. The screen displayed a series of archived case files, transport logs, internal reports, incident summaries. Different facilities, different years, but the same anomaly. 3 separate incidents, the analyst explained, all classified as minor transport irregularities. No escapes, no fatalities. But each one had a brief camera outage and unaccounted time. Bennett's eyes narrowed. How much time? 2 to 4 minutes, on average. Reeves stepped closer. That's not enough to stage an escape. No, Bennett said quietly, but it's enough to set one up. She scrolled through the files, her focus sharpening with each detail. These weren't failures, she said. They were rehearsals. Reeves frowned. Rehearsals for what? Bennett didn't answer immediately, because deep down, she already knew. Run the passenger's face against these incidents, she said. The analyst nodded. Typing quickly, the system processed the images, comparing fragments, angles, partial matches. Seconds stretched into a tense silence. Then, I've got something. The screen shifted. A name appeared, Daniel Cross. Reeves read it aloud. Daniel Cross, former corrections officer, discharged 8 years ago. Why? Bennett asked. The analyst pulled up the file. Official reason: procedural violations, and officially, he hesitated. Say it. He was suspected of forming relationships with high-risk inmates. Nothing proven, but enough to raise concern. Bennett leaned in closer. Where is he now? The analyst shook his head. No current address. No active records. It's like he dropped off the grid. Reeves exhaled. So this guy gets flagged for getting too close to inmates, disappears, and now he shows up in a transport van with one of the most dangerous inmates in the state. Bennett's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now. Not just shows up, she said. He was expected. Reeves looked at her. What do you mean? Bennett pointed at the frozen frame again. Look at the driver. Look at the posture. That's not fear. That's recognition. The realization hit hard. The officers hadn't reacted, because nothing about the situation felt wrong to them. Until it was too late. Cross didn't force his way in, Bennett continued. He was let in. The room went quiet again. Because that meant the breach hadn't started on the highway. It had started long before the van ever left the facility. Pull security logs from the departure point, Bennett ordered. I want every entry, every clearance, every face that walked through those gates. Reeves nodded. If Cross got inside, someone had to sign him in, or someone made sure he didn't need to be signed in at all, Bennett replied. Hours later, the results came back. And they were worse than anyone expected. There's a gap, the analyst said. His voice tight. 6 minutes. No camera footage. No access logs. Nothing. Bennett felt a cold weight settle in her chest. 6 minutes. That's right. Reeves ran a hand through his hair. That's not a glitch. That's deliberate. Bennett nodded slowly. And it lines up perfectly with the transport schedule. She turned back to the screen. Her mind racing. Cross had gotten in. Hale had gotten out. And the system had helped them do it. But one question still remained. Why? What's their connection? Reeves asked. Why Hale? Bennett didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for Hale's full file, the one most people never read beyond the summary. Page after page of reports, interviews, psychological evaluations. Then she found it. A note. Buried deep in the archive. A previous facility. A different state. And one name, listed under personnel at the time. Daniel Cross. Bennett's breath caught slightly. They've done this before, she said. Reeves looked at her sharply. Done what? Bennett closed the files slowly, her eyes dark with realization. Not escaped, she said. Transferred. Reeves frowned. Transferred where? Bennett looked back at the screen. At the still image of Hale stepping calmly into the fog. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Somewhere no one is supposed to find them. The room fell silent. Because in that moment, it became clear this wasn't just an escape plan. It was a network. And Marcus Hale wasn't running. He was being moved. But when they traced the last known connection between Hale and Cross, they uncovered a location that wasn't on any official record. A facility that didn't exist on paper. And when Bennett gave the order to investigate it, the response came back almost immediately. Detective, you need to see this, because the coordinates didn't lead to an abandoned site. They led to an active prison. One that, according to every official database, had no record of Marcus Hale ever being there. And yet his name was already inside. The facility that shouldn't exist. The coordinates led to a place that wasn't supposed to be part of the case, a medium-security correctional facility in rural Oklahoma, operational, documented, and fully staffed. On paper, It was routine, no recent incidents, no missing inmates, no irregularities, but when Detective Laura Bennett saw the name attached to its internal registry, her entire focus shifted. Marcus Hale, not listed as transferred, not listed as processed, just present. That's impossible, Reeves muttered, staring at the screen. Bennett didn't respond. She was already moving. We're going, she said. The drive took just under 2 hours. But it felt longer, the closer they got. The quieter everything became. No media presence, no emergency response units, no sign that anything unusual had happened, which made it worse. Because if Hale was there, and no one had reported it, then whatever was happening inside that facility was being kept deliberately quiet. They arrived just before dusk. The prison stood still against the fading light, its concrete walls casting long shadows. Everything looked normal. Guards at the towers. Lights functioning. Routine movement inside the yard. Too normal. Bennett stepped out of the vehicle, her eyes scanning every detail. We go and clean, she said. No alarms, no assumptions, Reeves nodded. And if they deny it, Bennett's expression hardened. Then we make them show us. Inside, the air felt different. Controlled. Measured. Like every movement had already been accounted for. Warden Ellis greeted them at the entrance, his posture calm, his tone polite, but there was something off in his eyes. Something guarded. Detective Bennett, he said. We weren't informed of your visit. You are now, Bennett replied. We're here regarding an inmate. Ellis nodded slowly. We can assist. Name. Bennett didn't hesitate. Marcus Hale. There it was. A flicker, small. Almost invisible, but Bennett saw it. Ellis recovered quickly. I'm not familiar with that name, he said. Bennett stepped closer. You should be. He's in your system. Ellis held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Then he gestured toward the interior. Let's check. They walked through the corridors in silence. Doors opened. Closed. Guards nodded as they passed, but none of them spoke. Bennett's eyes moved constantly, faces, positions, timing. Something about the rhythm of the place felt off. Too synchronized. As if everyone was following a script they had memorized. They reached the records office. Ellis sat at the terminal, pulling up the inmate database. You said Marcus Hale. Bennett crossed her arms. Yes, Ellis typed. Waited. Then turned the screen toward them. No record found. Reeves exhaled sharply. We've seen the internal registry. His name is here. Ellis's expression didn't change. Then what you saw was incorrect. Bennett stepped forward, placing a hand on the desk. We followed a transport breach. We identified a second individual, Daniel Cross. And we traced both of them here. At the mention of Cross, something shifted again. This time, it wasn't just Ellis. A guard near the door stiffened. Another looked away too quickly. Bennett saw it all. You're hiding something, she said quietly. Ellis leaned back slightly. Detective. This facility operates under strict protocols. If you're suggesting, I'm not suggesting. Bennett cut in. I'm telling you. He's here. The silence stretched. Then Ellis stood. Follow me. Reeves glanced at Bennett. You trust this? No, she said. But we're going anyway. They moved deeper into the facility, past the standard cell blocks, past administrative zones, toward a section that wasn't marked on any visible map. A secured door stood at the end of the corridor. No label. No designation. Just a keypad. Ellis entered a code. The door unlocked with a quiet click. Inside, the air changed again. Colder. Quieter. Different. This wing isn't part of the general population, Ellis said. It's used for special cases. Bennett's voice was low. Cases like Marcus Hale. Ellis didn't answer. They walked down the narrow hallway. Each cell was sealed. No windows. No visible occupants. Until they reached the last door. Ellis stopped. For the first time since they arrived, he hesitated. Open it, Bennett said. Ellis looked at her. Something conflicted flickered in his expression. Then, without a word, he keyed in another code. The door slid open. The room inside was empty. No bed. No restraints. No signs of occupation. Just a single chair, positioned in the center. Reeves frowned. This is it. Bennett didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the far wall. Because there it was again. The marking. 3 straight lines. 1 diagonal slash. Exactly the same. Where is he? She asked, her voice steady but cold. Ellis exhaled slowly. He was here. Bennett turned to him sharply. Was? Ellis nodded. For less than an hour. Reeves stepped forward. That's not possible. We tracked him here. Ellis met his gaze. You tracked the process, not the destination. Bennett's mind raced. What does that mean? Ellis looked back at the empty room. It means this facility isn't the endpoint. A heavy silence followed. Then what is? Bennett asked. Ellis didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped aside, revealing a small panel embedded in the wall. He pressed it. The wall shifted slightly. Not enough to open. Just enough to reveal another marking. More complex this time. Extended. Connected. A full pattern. Bennett felt a chill run through her. This isn't a holding cell, she said. Ellis nodded once. It's a transfer point. Reeves shook his head. Transfer to where? Ellis's voice dropped. We don't know. Bennett stepped closer to the wall, her eyes tracing the expanded pattern. It wasn't random. It was evolving, growing. This isn't just Hale and Cross, she said. This is bigger. Ellis didn't deny it. Every few years, he said quietly, someone like Hale comes through. Always controlled. Always precise. Always gone before anyone can ask questions. Reeves stared at him. And you let it happen. Ellis's jaw tightened. You think we have a choice? The question hung in the air. Because for the first time, it felt like the system wasn't just compromised. It was being used. Weeks later, the official report closed the case. Transport breach. Administrative error. No confirmed escape. No further action required. But Bennett couldn't accept that. Because she had seen the pattern. Followed it. And understood what it meant. 3 months later, a new case file landed on her desk. Different state. Different facility. Same marking. And one detail that made her blood run cold. An inmate transfer logged under a name that didn't exist in any official database. But the photo attached. Marcus Hale. Still moving. Still being transferred. Still one step ahead of a system that no longer seemed in control. And at the bottom of the report, a single line had been added. No author. No timestamp. Just a message. Stop following the path. Bennett stared at it for a long time. Because deep down, she already knew. This wasn't a warning. It was a test, and somewhere out there, the next transfer had already begun.